Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Filmism. I'm Ryan,
I'm Drew.
and it is 10:17 in the morning. The sound is me opening a beer. Yeah, in fact, a Ruby Red Kolsch from Genesee Brewing, and that is the one of the perks of working essentially third shift overnight. You can get out of work, and you've already been up for 11 hours, and
Yeah.
it's time for a beer. One thing that is not a perk of working an overnight shift is coming in and finding out that you need to run a test on a nuclear reactor that you have no idea how to run.
And your asshole boss is there. And he's an asshole because he didn't want to have to be there, but he wants to get promoted.
If that's too weird of a segue for you, I'd recommend looking at the title of this video because we're here to talk about the HBO miniseries Chernobyl.
Which does a excellent job as the aperitif for the after dinnerman to get rid of the horrible taste of the dog shit sandwich that was Game of Thrones.
Yeah, if you were considering dropping your HBO subscription just because Thrones is over, keep it. Something like this is bound to come up. It's worth just keeping around because now we know what they can really do. This is probably the best thing I've seen film-wise in
a year at least.
Yeah, TV, movies, anything. This is one of the best.
Like holistically, definitely. Like I've been entertained by stuff. I've liked things. I've not liked things, but overall, wholly, the experience of watching this, it's not a time sink. You actually want more, not more content. You just kind of are like, that was. If you listen to the podcast, which you should listen to the podcast companion to the show, you've only really spent 10 hours.
Yeah, and it tells a complete story. Now, it's nice going in and saying, okay, well, there's so much we want to tell, but we don't want to go over. And there's a lot that they cut too. But a lot of what they cut, let's back up. Let's frame Chernobyl as it starts with, so no spoilers here. It starts with Jared Harris's character, Legasov, recording some tapes and then hanging himself. And he's talking about how, what's the line about the truth?
There are so many because
the really famous one right from the start, about the cost of lies. Yeah, the cost of lies. That's what it is. Sorry, it's
that's your cold open. Is your main character that you know you're going to focus, you're going to be with for the entirety of the series is dead.
So yeah, you know exactly what's going to happen, and
then from there you get the title sequence, which isn't any like ostentatious title sequence. It's just title of the show.
Thank you. I was going to bring that up later. Everything seems to have in the last few years said we really like the True Detective opening. Let's everybody just try to
emulate an opening that people are going to try to dissect for meaning or anything like that. And then you literally cut to the explosion. No, let's meet the people who are working. Let's meet, the responders. No, you literally cut to an apartment through the window. Not like this isn't like a framed shot of the gate outside of Reactor 4 or anything. You just literally see in the background a plume and then blue light. It just doesn't disappear.
I don't even know where to begin with this show. The acting, the writing, the horror elements of it, the fact that it's almost all true.
Yeah.
Where do you want to start?
I think the best thing to take out of this, other than just the whole experience, is worth it. You might get the best things ever from the most unlikely sources.
Okay. You're talking about what?
Yeah.
Is it Craig Mazin?
Craig Mazin is the writer of this, and I'm looking at the Reddit right now. The other things he's written are the horrible Rocketman Disney animated or Disney movie from like '98.
Huh.
Scary Movie 3.
I believe both of the Hangover sequels.
Both Hangovers. Superhero movie.
What was that?
The like shitty cash-in Scary Movie watered down version.
Oh shit! I didn't even know that existed.
Yeah. Scary Movie 4. The Huntsman.
Is there anything good anywhere on his?
Unless it's his hand-picked, the only thing of any quality is this Chernobyl miniseries. So I guess it goes to show you that you could make your bucks doing things that you don't really care about, and then pick your spot.
And it's weird that he's not done anything like this before, because on the podcast he alludes to his age, and it sounds like he's in his late 40s.
Yeah, well, to have been writing mainstream movies, regardless of success or not, these are mainstream releases, studio releases. For the better part of the last 20 years, you probably have to have done some early work and stuff. But no, like being able to take something that you're gonna put the research into personally. He wrote every episode. It isn't like I'm the showrunner and then parceled it out. It's because it's so concise. You have one director, one writer, and the vision stays throughout, which is really nice for something this concise.
No, I do think that it is a little unfair to make Game of Thrones comparisons, though. Because,
no, I'm just saying in general.
Yeah.
Like, because you will have a lot of stuff that is like, oh, we're going to do like a 10-part miniseries, but, a friend of the creator is directing a certain episode because they had a vision for it. So you do have that kind of stuff happen. But here it's not.
In general, this is... You're only talking 5 hours total runtime.
Mm-hmm.
And 5 hours total runtime is essentially 2 movies.
Yeah, about.
This works a little better as a miniseries because instead of 2 movies, that's Dexter. Hi, Dexter. Where were we?
About how it works better as a miniseries.
Oh,
and
yeah,
even with it being a miniseries, there still is time dilation, like truncation of time, and especially in the final episode, which we'll get into it, but is almost all fabrication. But you've bought into the marriage of creative writing and realism.
Oh, that's what I was going to say. Every episode feels like a natural place to end it.
Yes.
Yeah, there's no... I wouldn't really call them cliffhangers, but maybe the second one.
There's natural cliffhangers. The second episode...
we're going to have to spoil everything in this.
Yeah, but tonally, there's choices made, but it's not like suspenseful cliffhangers. It's more like you want to be left feeling a certain way, so that going into the next episode, there's a weird sense of dread that's welcome while watching this, and it does a good job of even week to week of getting you in that mode before you're into an episode for the most part.
It does that in multiple ways too. I mean, there's the sense of dread in terms of the sense of dread, almost horror movie style, like they allude to in the podcast, where there's an unseen killer and people don't even know it. But then there's the other sense of dread in that you're seeing, you having the knowledge of what's going on and seeing the people making the choices that they're making and already knowing what the outcome's going to be. You just want to reach through the TV and slap them and tell them, hey, this is what you need to be doing. Like, almost every time I watch Braveheart, I think to myself, yeah, this rebellion's going great. Maybe if just this one little thing is different, he'll be successful. And then Robert the Bruce betrays him every time. And it's the same movie. That's never going to change. But it's a mark of good storytelling when it makes you think just this one little thing, and it would have been different.
And as a microcosm, it's awesome to make you feel like heart-pounding terror when somebody holds what looks like a block of concrete.
Yeah. My heart sank at several scenes throughout this.
Yeah, it's
in just absolute it helps knowing that these were all real people and that what you're seeing is largely a portrayal of stuff that happened.
Yes.
And that even if this was just a movie, it would have worked, but knowing that it happened makes it even better.
Yeah. Yeah, it does a good job of lingering on certain characters and elements, and then you get enough of it, and then you'll jump to something else. For the most part, you're gonna get the show focuses on Valery Legasov, who was the scientist brought in to assess the situation, and because it's the Soviet Union, everybody acted like, oh, nothing's really bad, but we do need somebody who's an expert on this just in case. And even just looking at documents, he realizes like they're lying.
Yeah.
Because
something is wrong here.
Or the best is they're not giving us the actual measurement, they're giving us the only measurement they can get.
Because that's where the instruments cap out. The other thing that this really gets into is, now this is a very Soviet thing in terms of, everybody lying to protect their jobs, and yes, that happens everywhere, but I think it's a staple of everybody's conception of the Soviet Union.
But I don't think they're presented in a cartoonishly Western way at all.
No, there's no moose and squirrel. There's, but when you
I would say from what you get,
when you get that level of bureaucracy.
Yeah, I mean, I would say more of the KGB stuff that comes into the show, that's patently Russian, but a lot of the political intrigue is probably no different here.
And the diehard believers too. I mean, there are certain people that no matter what weren't going to be swayed to do anything but keep the optics good. Did you watch Citizen X?
No.
They allude to it on one of the podcasts. And are you familiar with the story?
No.
It actually takes place during the same time period. The movie came out in the mid to late 90s, starring Donald Sutherland.
Okay.
It's about a serial killer in Ukraine. By the way, for anyone wondering, it's not the Ukraine, it's just in Ukraine. Just linguistics. But there's someone brought in to examine, there's a serial killer. Well, there can't be a serial killer because that's a Western decadent phenomenon. We can't have that here. Instead, because of the sexual nature of these crimes, we should just start rounding up homosexuals. This is all based on a true story. This guy ended up killing at least 53 people that we know of. And he was just preying on younger people, riding the trains, taking them out to the woods and killing them there. But a lot of the same elements of that's not how things are done in the Soviet Union.
Which, especially here, goes into the actual science of what happened and the decisions made.
Yeah. I think given the fact that, what's his name, Craig Mazin?
Yes.
Given that Craig Mazin brought up this movie, and he talks about, it's when he's talking about when he talks about how they don't use anyone with Russian accents. It's all just people talking normally.
Which I think is a good decision.
He brings up Citizen X in inspiring him to do it that way, which I think is kind of funny because if he saw this movie before he started researching this, there's a very good chance that this is what sparked him to do something about the Soviets, because the thematic and tonal similarities are spot on together. It's on HBO on demand if you want to watch it. It's worth watching.
That's interesting. But maybe they put it up there at his request, just to, hey, maybe people kind of want to get where I got some of the ideas.
It might have even been an early HBO film. I couldn't tell you for sure, though.
Could be. But going off of the idea of the optics of the Soviet Union, that goes into, which is great how they go relatively in depth on how the reactor functions and should function.
But they do it in a way that I understood.
Yeah, exactly.
They knew they had to talk to laymen, both
which
the audience and the audience of the final court proceedings.
Yes, doing it as, okay, we have a hearing in front of officials that are not physicists who need to understand what we need to do here. But we'll talk about it in depth. But the long story short is the button that's supposed to scram the reactor, basically stop the reaction entirely, doesn't work in that reactor. And the idea of them hitting it and the reactor blowing is preposterous to Dyatlov, who is running the test, because he hit the AZ button. The AZ5, but with the AZ5?
AZ5, yeah.
Scrams the reactor. The reactor can't blow up. It's an RBMK reactor. Soviet reactors don't blow up. It's clearly a feed water issue.
And that leads to some... I think what this show really... What this show does a great job of is showing the human cost of when mistakes are made. And they do it on more levels than I've been able to count sitting here brainstorming for this podcast, because it shows you the cost in terms of the people who died. They show a bunch of people at the very beginning when it blows up, everyone sees this fire going, and they all walk to this railroad bridge to watch the fire in the distance. And the first episode kind of ends with showing fallout coming down on them. And I'm pretty sure that at the very end, when they're showing when they do the text afterwards, what happened to everybody, it said that everybody on that railroad bridge died.
That's a real contentious thing. That's like the urban legend, but again, it's hard to find the Soviet records in the post-Soviet world. But the belief is that most or all of the people who were there, because you got to figure they're inhaling radioactive material that had to lead to very accelerated cancer.
And partially that's just ignorance of what the hell was going on.
Again, the Soviet optics. The final line in the series is that the Soviet death toll, which because the Soviet Union was in charge,
31
is 31 people, and that's the direct deaths because of ARS and because of injuries during the cleanup, things like that. That doesn't. They won't include the postnatal cancer, childhood cancer, because that's side effects to them. And
4,000 to 93,000 are the various estimates. But just the cost in human lives, like they were making decisions. Like they thought that the reactor was going to melt down and then poison the water supply in the area for basically eternity, ruining essentially the Black Sea and all its tributaries.
All of Western Europe would have gone.
Yeah. So they decide to send 600 miners.
I think 400.
400,
or maybe it was more than that. But the math was 100 out of every 400 died young.
Yeah, we'll say 400. But it's hundreds of miners had to go and dig underneath Chernobyl with no protective equipment in 130-degree heat to put in a cooling system to stop everything from melting down. And it turned out that it wasn't even necessary. The reactor never melted down to that point where it would be dead.
That's hindsight.
Exactly. It was a 50-50 shot.
Yeah.
They had no idea. When they couldn't figure out how to get all the graphite off of the roof, and all the robots kept just dying the minute they got up
one
there.
of the best moments in the series, again going back to the Soviet Union being concerned more about optics, is when Stellan Skarsgård, who should definitely win supporting actor in a miniseries for this. Basically, everybody in this should be getting statues. So you should watch it so that you're not like, hey, I'm going to watch the Emmys. Why is this show that I barely really heard about that was on HBO winning everything? You should watch it before then. Because it will win everything, or we will probably do an episode complaining.
I don't watch the Emmys, but I will check after.
Results,
at the very least, we'll bitch about it for a little while.
But Boris Sherbina, who Stellan Skarsgård plays, is, what was he, the Minister of Energy?
Yes.
And he basically becomes the procurement guy. Hey, what do we need, Valerie? We need all of the boron in the Soviet Union.
It was all the liquid nitrogen.
Yeah, liquid nitrogen and boron in the entirety of the Soviet Union. Okay, I'll make some phone calls. And early on, he starts out like that, but the character progresses. But he has this moment where he calls and he's like, "Yeah, the robot that we got from West Germany, which was already humbling enough for us to have to ask West Germany for a better robot, died immediately. Why did this happen? We were told that it would survive 12,000 Rankin. Oh, we only told him it was 2,000. Because that's the number we're willing to give outsiders.
Because we don't want to tell anybody.
Yeah. Because what was the line? Because there is no way a nuclear disaster could happen in the Soviet Union.
Nope. Speaking of Stellan Skarsgård, though, he's had some good movies. He's had some bad movies.
Regardless of what he's in, he's kind of like a Jürgen Prochnow, and I don't care what he's in, he's going to be fun.
He's almost a Ben Kingsley.
Yes. He doesn't care what the materials, but he will give it all. Yeah.
And this is, I've seen a lot of stuff with him in it, both the Exorcist prequels, where I thought he was one of the only saving graces. But this is, I don't want to call it a Stephen Dorff moment, because
No, he's been consistently good. He hasn't disappeared. Right. He's been in stuff, but it's one of the like he'll probably want to be remembered for being in this among other things.
Yeah, I think this is something where people who may look at things like Thor and think that he might have been washed up might turn around now and say, "Oh, okay, this guy really can carry a whole series, almost on his own."
Yeah. That gets us to Jared Harris,
who is absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah.
I have been a big fan of Jared Harris ever since I saw him as Moriarty. Opposite.
In what was it, Game of Shadows?
Yeah, Game of Shadows.
Yeah. And
so.
Guy Ritchie, Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah. So you've got Robert Downey Jr. and Jared Harris playing a game of chess on a balcony as they're having a debate, and then they stand up and they continue the debate. And they continue playing chess, but not on the board, but in their heads, telling them where their pieces are moving. Ever since that moment, I have said, oh, okay, I like this guy. I know he wasn't really doing it, but the way that they both were able to pull that scene off.
The way that they act, the way that they sell the performance.
Yeah. And then more recently, Jared Harris was one of the main protagonists on The Terror, which I will be buying as soon as it's back in stock somewhere. It's just sold out at this point.
Which is weird for an AMC release. You'd think they'd want to be putting out whatever they put money into to try to recoup what they can.
It's only like $13 for the whole Blu-ray of the first season.
That's weird.
So as soon as it comes back in, I will buy it. And if you'd like to borrow it, I would not mind having a debate at some point. What is the
better Jared Harris vehicle?
The better Jared Harris vehicle. The Terror, which is grossly underrated. I know it was a slow burn, but it was well worth it. You haven't seen it though.
No.
Okay. Or Chernobyl. And both are, I think one was 10 episodes, one was 5, but they're both self-contained stories.
Historical docudramas.
Historical, yeah. Although The Terror gets
there's a lot more extrapolation there just because of the time period and what actually happened.
Right. That being said, you had mentioned the final episode. Yeah, I think there was something you wanted to bring up about
it. This is where the companion podcast really helps out. Is the final episode is almost entirely fabricated. The principal cleanup protagonists, I guess, Boris Rabina and Valery Legasov, were not at the trials. The trials took weeks, but because this is a drama, you can kind of have a crucible moment and literally end it with like the show trial play. Like, we're gonna go into like everything you've seen and explain what really happened. And it maybe, I think right now, granted, you've got like the early latency period. It's the highest rated episode of anything on IMDb right now.
Yeah, and we're not talking by 0.1.
I think like it was 9 or something.
I think that it's beating the next one by at least a 1.5.
Yeah, I think the series overall is like a 9.6 on IMDb, which is crazy high.
I think theirs is in what 99. No, theirs is at 97.
I don't know.
Whatever. It's by a substantial margin over the next highest TV show.
But the final episode, it's the point where, all right, I've already done the legwork of watching the show and hopefully, like we said, listed in the companion podcast, so you know what isn't real and what is basically hard fact presented in the dramatization way. And it doesn't really have any ill effects on that last episode because it's just such a powerful end to this version of this themed version of what the cost of lying is.
The one line that really struck me from the podcast, because it was exactly what I was thinking, is the ending of this show is basically the ending of 1984, where you read 1984?
Yes.
Okay. Where was it? Winston Smith?
I think so.
Yeah. Where at the very end, they don't kill him. They could kill him, but they say, no, we're going to basically control your life. And at some point, you may end up getting killed. We won't tell you that. But we want you to still be around. This is how we're going to ruin you. And I was thinking that, and then during the podcast, they actually bring up that comparison, so I know I'm not crazy.
Yeah, it's like the worst punishment for somebody who is in the know is basically let them languish.
Yeah, it reminded me a little of the ending of The Shield, where
Very
Vic Mackey is able to be the only one who really survives, but it's at the cost of he will never be out on the street being a cop ever again because they need to keep him around for reasons, but they're going to make sure that his life is miserable and he hates every moment of it. And that's what ended up happening with Legasov until eventually he recorded some tapes about what happened, saw that they would be distributed, and then hanged himself.
Mm-hmm. And that it was, I think they said it was the third attempt to kill himself.
Yeah.
And this is where the reality is as interesting because you're getting to the actual fact, but the way they choose to present certain things flows perfectly for what they're trying to tell.
Yes.
So they briefly talk about how they even filmed that Famine, who was he wasn't the plant supervisor, he was like the plant head engineer. Yeah. Despite, if you ever read into it, he got his engineering degree via a mail order, essentially.
From the same place that Sam Tarley got his master degree, yes, and that Braun got his economics degree.
But Famine tried to kill himself before the trial, which delayed the trial. And then afterward, see, a lot of these guys were lucky because they were basically sentenced to 10 years hard labor.
Mm-hmm.
The Soviet Union collapsed like 2 years later.
And they
kind of just let most of them go. And Famine worked in nuclear power after that again.
Yeah, for the record, I just want to say that nothing that we can say on this podcast is going to tell you how good this show is.
I think that's why we kind of skirted around bullet point. Let's go through episode to episode.
Yeah. Episode 4 is incredibly difficult to watch.
Yes.
Episode 4
But it also has what I might argue might be the best scene in the entire series.
Are you talking about Stellan Skarsgård freaking out?
No, 90 seconds on the roof.
Oh, yeah. Let's back up to the dogs, though. We need to get this out of the way.
Episode 4, to be brief, is basically this is what liquidation was. This is what we conscript, because this is the Soviet Union. We can call you in and tell you you're going somewhere to do something for the government.
And this is in the weeks and months after the event happened, and now it's time to get the cleanup done. And when they evacuated Pripyat, the city that was right near the
Chernobyl reactor. Pripyat and Chernobyl. Chernobyl is a little bit south of the plant. Pripyat's east.
So they evacuate both. And when they did, they told people, okay, you can bring one bag. You're not allowed to bring your pets.
Yeah, I think they said bring a couple changes of clothes, bring some lunches.
Yeah,
this probably be back temporary. In 3 days.
Yep.
And what they do talk about in the podcast is that it was interesting, and this is exactly how it happened. It was like 15 minutes, and everybody was gone.
Yeah.
Because in the Soviet Union, if the government tells you something, you do it. Here, you'd have squatters, you'd have, no, I'm not leaving. In the Soviet Union, you didn't do that. You were told by the government, who you trusted, that you needed to go somewhere, and you didn't. So, luckily, this is one thing where if this were to happen, if 3 Mile Island would have gotten as bad as it would have, this probably wouldn't have happened.
Do you also think, though, that if this happened in Pennsylvania, that maybe awareness of what nuclear power is in the United States might have been a little bit higher, and people would have been looking to get the hell out anyway?
3 Mile Island was when? 70?
No, it was like 80... It was right before Chernobyl, I thought.
I don't think so.
Huh.
I don't think the average person really knew that much, even in the States, about the effects of radiation. I think we knew it was bad, and big numbers mean bad things, but you didn't really know that it effectively it's a very vampiric element.
I'm Googling 3 Mile Island. I actually typed in 3, then the letter N, and it brought up 3 ninjas, so I'm looking at the wrong thing right now. 79. Okay. Yeah, 79. I was incorrect.
But, I mean, we live in Western New York. Love Canal was built and people were living in it before they realized what was wrong.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. But back to the liquidation. They had people leave behind their pets because They told them they'd be back in a few days, whatever, just leave them. Now, I don't know at what point this was all realized.
Well, I think a lot of it, too, is just even knowing that, even those in charge of the evacuation, knowing it was going to be a permanent evacuation, the Soviet Union didn't have dog food. Like, it wasn't a thing. Like, you had to wait for everything. Pripyat was unique. They talk about this in the podcast, that it was basically a model Soviet city, meaning that they were one of the few places where you could get pretty much anything you needed without having to wait forever for it. Mm-hmm. You could go to the store and stuff would be there. But even then, like, there was a utilitarian aspect of the Soviet Union, probably too because their economy was collapsing. But we're already moving heaven and earth to get buses from another busy city to move people out of an entire city. We're not going to waste time with pets. We deal with that later.
Exactly. But it turns out everything left behind was irradiated, including the animals. So at the risk of, maybe we'll have a pack of wild dogs leave the area irradiated and go to the next town over. Yeah. They decided to send people in to start liquidating the pets as well.
Everything. Farm animals. Everything had to go. Everything had to go. Wildlife, they literally had to comb the forests, too. Yeah. They had to till every
inch of soil,
basically.
All the crops had to be burned. But we get the story of what Pavel was his name?
I think so.
He's the kid from Dunkirk.
Yes.
Yeah. So he gets conscripted. He goes in, and they give him a Mosin-Nagant rifle, and it is his job to go around basically killing pets. And I think it did a very good job of showing the emotional toll that doing something like that would have on a person.
Yes. Yeah, you get his story in just that episode, and he's not even the pivotal character in the Pet Liquidators story arc. Mm-hmm. It's really, was it Bacho? Who is an Afghan vet.
Yeah.
And even you could tell even for him this is bad.
Yeah. So
he's able to, put on soldier mode.
There, for any hunters that may be listening to this, I understand that sometimes, killing an animal for meat or whatever, but any time that you have to take something's life, human or otherwise.
Well, in this case too, it's not sport. It's not even sporting at all.
Right. This is just I'm killing this animal that doesn't understand why, and yeah. So, and you're right, the fact that a hardened Afghan vet who I think is at least adapted to killing people is having trouble killing pets, which I sympathize with. And you can see that he's putting on a very hard face for all of this. But whoever that actor was did an incredible job of letting some cracks show.
Yes. This also goes into... I don't remember. The last two episodes, at least, have very great episode titles. Episode 4, which is the dog killing episode, is
for the happiness of all mankind. Which you couldn't. It turns out that was really a banner on a building in the area that the liquidators ran.
Yeah, because I think it was they were setting up for the festival. Yeah, they were setting up for the party foundation festival or whatever.
Mayday parade or something. Yeah. You couldn't make that up if you tried.
And then just going through the subreddit, I think the last episode is Viknaya Parmyat or something, and apparently that's Russian for eternal memory.
Oh.
And it's part of a funeral prayer or something.
Okay. I was kind of hoping they would get into that on the podcast, and they didn't.
They didn't, but apparently on the subreddit, a lot of people who lived in the USSR are like, this is really accurate, visually to what so I was gonna watch it thinking, I'm gonna find everything that Westerners aren't gonna get, and they're like, nope, the buses look right, the telephones look right, the cigarettes. Most people didn't have filtered cigarettes because that was more expensive, but for the most part, everything looks right.
You know what it reminded me of? It reminded me of World War II vets who watched Saving Private Ryan.
Yeah, they're like, they actually got
they got this
or
right.
kit pouches and stuff, right? Yeah.
And just in general, what it was like, because you had things like The Longest Day where you had explosive charges that looked more like fireworks for the explosions on the beach, and then you end up with Spielberg getting actual amputees running around with fake severed limbs, and that level of they talk about it on the podcast, which you should be listening to that, not this. That they felt that they owed it to the people that lived through it to get it right,
yes.
to get it accurate. So kudos on that.
And there's also excellent narrative choices. We did talk about how you see the explosion before you really even know the people involved. And that's so that in episode 5, they go back and basically go hourly through the day before the explosion. Now you've already known these people, so you actually feel something about these people.
And while you do need someone consistent through the whole show, I do like the fact that it doesn't focus really on any one person, and that it really drives home that this was bigger than any one person.
Yes.
And that it impacted so many facets of so many people's lives, from the wife of a firefighter who died and then she lost her kid, to the people that were actually working in the reactor. It's any of those are a self-contained story. And then, of course, we do have Jared Harris.
Yes.
Who is the one narrative thread through 4 of the 5 episodes, because he actually isn't in the first one other than
at the very beginning,
and very end.
Right, no, not right at the end. I think don't they go, or is that in the second episode?
No,
because they go.
Regardless, he's got about a minute of screen time in the first.
Yeah,
episode.
for the most part. Yeah, the first episode is basically a live reenactment of the disaster.
But without any context to know why it happened.
It's,
so that you're as confused as the people are. And it was brilliant.
And that's where you really start. If you thought you could hate... I'm not going to hate anybody more than I hate Joffrey Baratheon. The dramatized version of Dyatlov is quite possibly the worst human being ever. Completely, remorseless.
I think what makes him it's so easy to take somebody like a Hitler and say this is the worst person ever, but a lot of people will never.
I think for this,
a lot of people will never be around a dictator, a genocidal dictator. Yeah. Most people at some point in their lives will have to deal with a Dyatlov.
Yeah, it's just somebody who's incredibly arrogant and uninformed.
Yeah.
Arrogant and ignorant, basically,
all rolled
and they don't even go they don't even go into what a lot of people have in looking into him, because he was the senior floor supervisor for the plant. So there's a lot of people who, looking into the disaster, have looked into him, and there's this pretty consensus idea that they don't really touch on, which is probably better for the show. That it's not another through line, because it would have probably hijacked a bit of story elements. That he thought he was a master of nuclear energy,
because he survived an accident.
Yeah, because he survived a similar, not similar scale, but he survived an exposure himself. And the argument is that he was I've been around the worst that this shit can give me. There's nothing, there's no way this is that bad.
How did he survive 2 exposures and not end up with spider powers?
Because during Chernobyl, he just sent everybody else out of the room.
Yeah, but he was around still.
Well, he did die because of his exposure. It's just, they do go into it a bit that everybody has a secret number.
Right.
But everybody has a threshold, and it's once you're past that threshold that the big guy who held the door open, he's survived. I think he's still alive.
Huh.
Who held the reactor door open.
2 of the 3 swimmers. We should talk about the swimmers.
Yeah, two of the 3 swimmers that survived. No, all 3 of them survived. One died 5 or 6 years ago.
Well, 5 or 6 years after the event.
No. The one that died most recently died in 2001 or 6.
That was 15 years ago, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're old.
Yeah, at least we're not people thinking, oh, what if this actually happened?
I'll let you. I didn't see this on Reddit.
All I've seen is anecdotal evidence. People I got my friends to watch this, and then, what if this had really happened? And then just internet facepalms of, this did happen. I was 3 days old when this happened. Here's a little side story. I was 3 days old when this happened, and...
Wait, you?
Yes. I was born on the 23rd. And I was in an incubator because I had some birth defect. And my mom was like, well, at least he's in something that will keep the fallout off of him.
Holy shit. I had no idea.
Yeah. That's what gets to my... Nobody really knew to the extent of how bad this could be. But there was a giant cloud, and Stellan Skarsgård does have like a little
anecdote. Yeah,
in that like
they couldn't pick mushrooms anymore.
Certain places you can't.
In Sweden, they couldn't pick mushrooms
because they're just worried about the low level radiation.
Well, we've been doing this for about 40 minutes.
It's because it's a good topic, so you want to keep talking.
I know. Eventually, people are going to get bored of us, though, and
True.
If they haven't watched,
they're going to book their trips to the zone to be one of these idiots who goes walking around the zone. You know, there's actually still unfound pieces of graphite out there.
And the body of the one guy is still in the reactor.
He had to have gotten vaporized. Something. The biological shield is like apparently 15 degrees from vertical. That's supposed to be flat on top of the reactor.
Oh, okay. You're right. We could talk about this all day. This is one of the best things I have seen in a very long time, and I wish that more stuff of this quality would come out. But I understand that that's not a realistic expectation.
Yeah, I think we've kind of touched on this idea. It's the odd combination of people having the money, somebody having the idea and the drive, and both of those things coming together at the right time, because I think HBO really needed a win.
I also like that they never got preachy about anything other than lying. The main, if you had to really Cliff Notes,
I mean, they could have gone cheesy and like Enemy at the Gates ish about how like Soviet and proud it is to like give yourself to this. Like there's elements of that and in humorous elements of that, but it's never presented any more than how it would realistically be seen.
Yeah.
There's no musical swells. The soundtrack's great too.
We even talk about that.
No.
It's there with you the whole time. It really brings out the dread.
Yes.
But that it limits itself. It knows that it doesn't want to. Certain things like Conan the Barbarian live and die on its score.
Yes.
Nolan movies.
It's very so you'd say it's very Carpenter.
Wallpaper.
Yes. And that it
but very good wallpaper.
Yes. But yeah. In closing, I guess, because we could ramble on. Definitely watch this, and you'll never hear anything clicking and not be terrified ever again.
And those scenes where, who'd have ever thought that just the clicking of a Geiger counter would be enough to send the tension of the viewer through the roof? There were several gripping the armrest moments that I had.
The end of the end of episode 2, where they're the divers. They were waiting. I think they said, based on their testimony, the most they got ever. They were never submerged. They were at
like chest
height. Yeah. This is chest high in like heavy water, like irradiated water.
Yeah.
But yeah,
in pitch black.
Yeah, and they were talking about it too, that they were using like auto crank flashlights, because radiation destroys everything, even electronics.
Yeah.
So you've got just the hum of them using this like hand crank light, and the not the whining scream of the dosimeter because it's that high. It's not clicking. And then the episode just cuts to dark while they're looking through pipes.
The real guys lost their flashlights, and that was it. They just had to find their way around in the dark.
Yeah.
But for the show, they added a flashlight because otherwise it would have gotten kind of weird showing them in the dark.
Just thematic choices and sound choices. And then, like we said, I think one of the best scenes is in the 4th episode, the 90 seconds of what the bio-robots, the men who had to clear... Was it Misha?
Misha, yeah.
The most irradiated surface on the planet Earth, other than in the core.
Yeah.
They don't even talk about the elephant's foot, which is more crazy stuff they could have gotten into, but they wanted to tell a story about the debt you incur by lying and not focus on the
little
more
anecdotes.
Interesting like aspects of the real story.
But they established right from the opening that it's about the cost of lies and what happens when lies accumulate and nobody is willing to confront those, and sometimes there are very real world consequences to that. And they could have gotten preachy about things like nuclear power or whatever, but they did it because that wasn't the point. nuclear power is still, widely used.
France, I think, is still the number one proprietor of it.
And when done right, it's
the most effective way to
exactly
power current society.
So I'm glad that
it's just when it goes wrong, or when, like Fukushima, when nature does something that you can't control, things can go very badly.
Yes.
Watch this.
Yeah. I'm gonna try to edit out most of it, but special guest appearance by Dexter the dog. You might hear a couple barks. If not, I can edit out this line too. Any closing thoughts?
Just watch this. It's not a huge commitment. Definitely use YouTube or whatever podcast app you're using
for the companion.
Completely available. I think if you watch on HBO Go, you can just literally jump from the episode into the podcast.
That's pretty neat.
I just listen to it on my computer, but yeah, it's all told. If you take the whole experience, it's probably 10 of the best, most entertaining and informative hours you're gonna have.
And I may sit down at some point and just binge all 5 episodes again right through to see if that changes the viewing experience. I'm sure it will.
There have already been people that I think have edited episode 5 into
episode 1 as a loop.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, because it ends with. By the way, you get that last monologue from Jared Harris as the camera backs up and it shows him being driven off in a car, and it was a gut punch of an ending, and one of the most well done endings I've seen to anything in quite a while.
Yeah. There's a lot of meme-worthy lines. A lot of people have already started.
Oh, the one about our currency?
Everybody's been memeing 3.6, not great, not bad. What was it, the equivalent of 46 chest x-rays? Oh, it's not terrible. That's 46 chest x-rays. But, yeah, there are some great, like, one-liners that fit into what the story is. What was it? Why worry about something that won't ever happen?
And that's where you said, why don't we have that written on our currency? Yeah. And that's one of the best lines
probably in the show.
All right, let's end it there. Thanks for listening. I will say that when this came out, we were partway through this, and then Godzilla was released. And this, not that Godzilla is great, we'll talk about that in a future podcast, probably one that we're going to record as soon as we're done here. But it did ruin part of Godzilla for me.
Yes.
Because I couldn't take what they were doing with the radiation seriously.
Yes.
But yeah, we'll talk about that more in the Godzilla episode. That is a segue, people. Ooh. Yeah. All right. Thanks for listening.
In closing, we could have done this podcast more efficiently. We could have took notes. We could have edited better. But you know why we didn't? Because it's cheaper.
Well done.